I'm producing a documentary on Stan Getz, and Getz was on the road with Tea Garden in ninth grade. Okay, and the guy had no formal academic training. He just had perfect pitch. He had the most melodic. You could write lyrics to his melodies, but most importantly, he had big ears. And I would love you to talk to the audience about when you, but maybe it was with Barry because he was out in Spaceland. But when did your ears grow the most?
Oh God. Without a doubt, the first 2 or 3 months after we put together the Allman Brothers, it may have happened in that one first jam that we had when it was me and J-Mo and Barry and Duane and Dickie and Reese Winans. This was before Greg came from L.A. And we got into a jam at the Second Cummings house, and Duane had been there in Jacksonville for 3 or 4 weeks trying to put together a band, and he had finally decided on who was going to be in that band, and we were in that was us, and except for Greg, he still had to get Greg in, but we started a jam that lasted 3 or 4 hours, and I mean, it was just like, it was like my brain went, "Oh my God, you can do this! This is unbelievable." But I'll say probably the most important moment in my life, musically and culturally, and for my life in general, was a jam that I had a few weeks earlier than that, because I had played with Duane a couple of years before he came to Jacksonville to do the Allman Brothers. Me and a guy named David Brown and Scott Boyer, we had this group called the Bitter End, and we were friends with Duane and Greg, and we happened to be coming through Daytona after their Hourglass thing split up, and we joined forces. Went to Miami, recorded a bunch of stuff. That album was released as Duane and Greg Allman, and it was not. In fact, most of the songs on there, Duane and Greg aren't even on it. But it's the first time Melissa was ever recorded. But anyway, I had this tendency back then. I wasn't all that self-confident. And I had a tendency to kind of, if things weren't going great, to kind of pull back. Mm-hmm. And so when Duane came to Jacksonville to put together the band, he had J-Mo. And J-Mo, incredible jazz player, but he knew that J-Mo wasn't powerful enough to drive the kind of band that he wanted to put together. And he said, if James Brown can have 2 drummers, so can I, So
that's right.
So J-Mo kept telling him, because there's 3 or 4 other drummers that wanted that job, and they were pretty good. They were damn good. And J-Mo kept telling him, Butch is your guy. Butch is your guy. But I don't think Duane was going to have me in his band with that fault, with that, backing up when things weren't going well. And we were jamming one day and got into this shuffle that wasn't going anywhere. And I'm thinking, oh, my God, everybody's looking at me. So I started pulling back. And Duane whipped around and stared me in the eye and played this lick like, come on, damn it. And my first reaction is, oh, my. And then he did it again. And then he did it again. And after about the 3rd time, I started realizing there's hundreds of people out there watching him show me up. And I started getting pissed. And so he did it again, and then I slammed my damn drum, and then he did, and he and I literally got into a fist fight with our instruments. I was hitting my drums like I was hitting him upside the head, and he was throwing it back at me, and we went back and forth, and then finally he stepped back and smiled and pointed at me and went, "There you go."
That's
and it's like he reached inside of me and flicked this switch, And this light went on and said, Butch, you may not be the greatest drummer in the world, but you can play. And there is no reason to ever apologize. And that from that day to this, I have never backed off.
Well, I mean, that I mean, Jimmy Smith used to. I don't know. Did you ever see Jimmy play the organ player?
Yeah.
Because that dude would do
man,
that.
I've always wanted to put together a big band to do nothing else but walk on the wild side with a great organ player.
No, but he, I talked to cats that would see him at Small's Paradise, places in New York, and he did the same thing. Not necessarily to motivate a drummer, but to the audience. He'd play a lick. And if you didn't get it, he'd play the same lick. And if he didn't get it, he'd play it again and again. And he'd get right in your face about it. It was like, you are going to dig this. And I love the fact that there's Duane basically saying, Butch, you're here for a reason. Get on your horse and start woodshedding. Start playing. And to me, that's...
Well, it wasn't a matter of woodshedding.
That's
I
the
knew
wrong
what
word.
I was
That's
doing.
the wrong word
It was
to
a
use.
matter of just getting my head straight, It was a matter of just playing with power and playing with confidence and quit being afraid,
Right.
That's plain and simply what it was. And that epiphany is the reason that I got in the Allman Brothers rather than being a math teacher.
No, we're really.
And by the way,
yeah.
that philosopher that all of the guys in San Francisco picked up from, his name was Herbert Mancuso.
Now I'm curious about because this was Greg was on the left coast, and you got were there cats, were there philosophers that were you reading that stuff? What were you deriving from? Because let's face it, you guys were blazing a trail that nobody had blazed before. I mean, like Dave Mason told me. Dave Mason said he's like, we just basically heard the blues, we heard the from the States, we did it in England, we repackaged it and sold it back to you. So you guys were doing stuff that was completely revolutionary, but yet relentless touring, a lot of substance abuse, a lot of insanity. Tell me a little bit about some of the philosophers that you got off on.
Well, I didn't really start reading the heavy philosophy until Duane and I did it. I was an avid reader. I read my way through high school, somehow graduated top of my class, and all I did was sit in the back of the class and read books all the time. But when the Allman Brothers started, this is very, very odd, but the very first day that we had rehearsal in Macon, Georgia, was the day I started Tolkien's Lord of the Rings.
Wow.
And that got me into, and I'd always been into mythology. I mean, all the way through high school, all the Edith Hamilton and, Metamorphosis, the Roman guy, Ovid, yeah. And I read, all Greek and Roman mythology. That fascinated me. But Tolkien is the mythology of the 20th century, and The Lord of the Rings is the best of the best.
That's
so
right. Mm-hmm.
I read that, and I've probably read it 20, 25 times since then, and seen the movies many times. And thank Peter, whatever his name is, for making that film. Those were incredible. But I turned Duane on to Tolkien. We used to go fishing when we'd have time off. We'd have an afternoon off. He and I'd just go find a lake somewhere and buy a couple of cheap rod and reels and sit on the side of the lake with plastic worms and talk. And and Duane was also an avid reader. He and I were the two readers in the band. And he was reading all kind of stuff, and I turned him on to Tolkien. And as you may know, his daughter's name is Galadriel.
I don't think I knew that.
Yeah, well, she wrote that book called, she wrote her. Oh, come on, it's
Let me. It's my turn to go. Duane, how do you spell that? That name?
Oh, come on, Galadriel. It's just like the book, except he adds an E to it. Galadriel with an E to it. Galadriel Allman. The book is come on, it's a song that Scott Boyer wrote.
There we go. It's coming. It's called "Please Be With Me."
Please be with me. That's it. Thank you.
No problem.
So, and then anyway, I'm actually wearing a shirt right now that has on it what got us into real philosophers. It says, "Without music, life would be a mistake." That is a quote from Friedrich Nietzsche. And Duane read that somewhere, and we were talking about that one day, and he was finishing up Tolkien, and we're thinking, well, what are we going to read next? And I said, well, how about we try Nietzsche? I really didn't know what I was saying, but I said, well, why don't we try it? So we got his magnum opus, which is called Also Sprach Zarathustra, and we dove in, and that's what we used to do. We'd go sit and fish and talk for an hour or two about what we've been reading. And, I mean, Nietzsche's Also Sprach Zarathustra is pretty dense stuff. And because the two of us are reading it together, we were able to pick up on a lot more than if we'd have been on our own. Duane would catch things that I would miss, and I would catch things that he would miss. And then we went from there to John Locke because of Locke's real profound philosophy about the separation of church and state.
Sure.
You know, although Locke was a devout Christian, he knew how horrible it was when the church runs the government. You know, he finished the Spanish Inquisition and the Crusades, and you know, we can see what's going on with theocracies in the Middle East right now. You know.
Oh, I mean, you are nailing. I mean, to me, this is like. I mean, I'm glad you followed your career path. I almost wish you became a teacher. I mean, this is. But you know, I mean, can I ask you a question? This is really funny. I interviewed a cat named Tom Ledden, Bernie Ledden's brother, a couple weeks back, and he was in a band called Mudcrutch with Tom Petty. Did you? They used to play strip clubs in Jacksonville. Did you play any burlesque houses? This is pre-Allmans. Did you ever play? Like, what was the funniest venue you ever played in?
Oh, wow. Well, I guess the funniest venue I'd ever played in was the last one I just did with the freight train.
What was that?
We played on a little steamboat on a lake just up in New York someplace.
Yeah, I mean that's like white collar. I'm talking like, you know, job for. I mean, because I talked to plenty of cats who, I mean, literally the strip clubs used to provide great, you know, jobs for a lot of the jazzers. They'd play 3 cents.
Oh, it did. I know, but we didn't do that. By the time I was old enough to be playing strip clubs, we were putting together the Allman Brothers. So, maybe I had a year there. I could have,
yeah.
But I was on the band with the Bitter End, and we were playing the psychedelic dungeons that were popping up all over the South back then. And
tell me a little bit about if you could talk. We had such a great interview, and I really. Find her to be an inspiration, and I think that she's sort of right place, right time, but also somebody who's really growing into herself. You just talk about the experience of having an opportunity to be on the bandstand with Heather Gillis.
Oh, with Heather?
Yeah.
She just, you know, the day that I met her, I was playing some blues club outside of Tallahassee. And somebody came up and tapped me on the shoulder and said, there's this girl here that wants to sit in. And she came walking up, and my first reaction is, boy, this is going to suck, you know.
Yeah, right.
Because it's like, you know, it's like being born a billionaire where I work,
right,
you know.
Right.
You know, Heather can make it through life just fine just on what she looks like, you know.
Sure.
She doesn't have to learn how to play anything or sing anything, but she got up and she did that Bill Withers song, Ain't No Sunshine When She's Gone, and then just ripped that Gibson Les Paul, and I went, oh, my God, you know. I mean, she's still young and she still has a ways to go, but, boy, she's already gone a long way for someone 21 years old. And playing with her these last 2 years, I've just been watching her explode, you know, because she never stops practicing. And she's just really, really bright. It's a lot of fun, and it's really fun being in the band with her, you know. And
I mean,
yeah.
So can you talk about like the sonically what she's added to the freight train, or you know, in terms of not just vocally, but I don't think I realized that she was that prolific guitar player as well.
No, she's a damn good guitar player,
yeah.
And I mean, you know. Like I say, she's still got a ways to go, but she's doing it. I mean, she's twice as good now as she was 2 years ago, and because her mind is open. You know, she was madly in love with Derek, my nephew, and she thought Derek hung the moon until she heard Jack Pearson playing. And now that's all she can listen to is Jack Pearson. I mean, you know, Jack plays free. He plays open. You never know what he's going to do next, you know.
Right.
And he's got all the chops in the world, you know. And, you know, Derek's got all the chops, but Derek tends to be a little formulaic with the way he approaches his guitar now. And once she found out, I mean, now I'm having a ball, just, you know, because to me that's what I love playing, and it's the reason I'm still doing it. And all the people that are in the Freight Train Band, Heather, Damon Fowler, this Chris that we just added from Bruce Katz's band. I wish I could have gotten Baylor, my son, to join the band, but I don't know. He seemed to he used to laugh about it. He played with us a lot, but
he's in a trio though, right? You got a trio of his own.
Yeah, he's got this group called the Yeti Trio.
What's that about? What is the Yeti Trio? I was like very fascinated.
It is you take Sun Ra and
wow, I love it.
And people like and just mix it together and they are incredible. Incredible.
No, they've
never heard of 4/4 or 3/4 in their lives. I mean, they're all over the damn place, time signature wise. But anyway, I kept trying to get Baylor to say, why don't you quit your job? He's got a great job. He's head of IT for a big insurance company in Atlanta. And he finally bust out laughing one day. He said, you know, I got to be the only kid in the world whose dad wants him to quit a 6-figure job to go to join a rock and roll band.
He made decent bread on the rock scene, though. I mean, you know, not as good as that. But, you know, I know. Here's the thing. I want to be clear, Butch, because I've interviewed Jabo and Clyde Stubblefield, and with James Brown, they were never on the bandstand together. Were the Allman Brothers... Were you guys the first ones to have two drummers on the bandstand together?
No, the Dead were doing it first.
Now you saw
the Dead were doing it first. Now the difference is the way the Dead do it is Kreutzmann and Mickey. They're very careful about, you know, working around each other. Kreutzmann will play the pattern and Mickey is over playing whatever it is he plays. I'm not quite sure.
He's the punctuator. You know, he's doing these fills or something. Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know.
I know. We've all been.
I mean, the last time I saw the Dead, when that Planet Drum started, I had to leave.
You know what? I'll be honest with you. In full disclosure, I've talked, and I'm not trying to bag on him because he's done some cool collaborations, but I mean, Mickey can't. I mean, it's well known going back to the New Riders of the Purple Sage, and he could just never keep time. So go ahead, continue.
No, he just can't play. Yeah. But anyway, but what J-Mo and I.
Yeah, right. But you saw them play
from the first day we ever played.
Yeah.
We both just played completely and totally what we wanted to play.
Wow.
But our styles just happen to be such that they work. You know, I come from a rock and roll, you know, on the beat type of background. And J-Mo, although he was playing rhythm and blues, played with Otis Redding and Sam and Dave and Percy Sledge and all those people, his passion was jazz. And when I first met him, you could hardly tell him from Max Roach.
Really?
I mean, oh, yeah. And in fact, that's what he was going to do when he got the call to go to Muscle Shoals and meet Duane. He was headed to New York to go starve as a jazz drummer. And
right, go starve in an alley
and one of his buddies, in fact, it was the guy who wrote Try a Little Tenderness, a guy named Jackie Avery, told him, he said, man, you ever want to make money, get in one of those white bands. And so he got the call, and he said, well, let me go see what's going to happen here. And he went over and met Duane, and the two of them hit it off. And then Duane brought him to Jacksonville, and I met him, and then we hit it off. And then we started playing together, and it was magic. I mean, because the way he approaches, you know, a jazz drummer tends to be very syncopated. Is always playing around what the lead player is playing. When Elvin's playing and John Coltrane's playing Love Supreme,
right,
Elvin's playing really light, playing patterns that do nothing but accentuate what John Coltrane is playing. And so when J-Mo and I played together, we never got in each other's way, and it was never planned. We never practiced it. That's just the way we play. And the only problem that we did have was with our bass drums, and we solved that by the way we tune them. J-Mo used an 18-inch bass drum with no muffler, and so we put my bass drum in the mix right down the middle, big 22-inch bass drum with a muffler on it, so you get that funk, that you want from the bass drum in a rock and roll band. And then J-Mo's bass drum was more like a tom-tom.
Sure.
It sounded more like a tom-tom. It didn't sound like a bass drum. So our styles worked, and the only problem that we would have had, we solved just by the way we tuned our drums.